going to do the documentary panel, the emotional journey of documentary filmmaking. This is a really interesting one. I think it'll be a really great conversation. And I think for somebody like myself who's not a documentary filmmaker, I think that this is often forgotten that it's a very emotional process. It's not just some objective journalistic venture. It involves a lot of developing personal friendships during this time and exploring, immersing yourself into a subject's world, which often can involve a lot of traumatic recounting of events or delving into negative issues. So uncovering and documenting these often emotionally charged topics can take its toll on documentary filmmakers. This panel brings a spectrum of documentary filmmakers from diverse backgrounds and years of experience to discuss their approach to safeguarding theirs and their subjects' mental health while completing their projects. Our moderator today is Joanna Wong. She is a Vancouver-born queer producer and showrunner with a passion for cross-cultural content. She is a producer with Black Rhino Creative and the co-founder of Jugad Sisters, and all women of color-owned Canadian production companies. So please welcome to the stage Joanna, who will introduce the panel for us, or they'll be introducing themselves.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joanna Wong, and it is such a delight to be here with this incredibly talented crew today. We all have documentaries in our lives that have been such an emotional process just through watching them. And some documentaries I've watched have stayed with me for a lifetime. That's an experience of an hour or two. These are filmmakers who have given often years of their life to this process. And this is our chance to lift up the hood and go through that process together today. So we as a panel have thought it could be very interesting to look at this as past, present, and future, a story in 3 parts. I'm going to start with letting everyone just quickly introduce themselves, starting from Thea.
Sure. Hello, my name is Thea Liu. I'm a producer, director. I'm currently making a 1-hour documentary called Inai, which means mother. It's in post-production right now, and it'll be coming out by sometime next year.
Hello, everyone. I'm Kent Donginas. I'm a Filipino-Canadian filmmaker based here in Vancouver. Currently in production with TELUS Originals and Knowledge Network for Canadian Adobo and Treasure of the Rice Terraces.
Hi, my name is Baljit Sangra. I'm a filmmaker, so writer, director, producer. I have my company Viva Mantra Films. I've made documentaries, and probably a theme that connects a lot of them is I'm pretty passionate about telling underrepresented stories. So most of my documentaries, in particular, have been South Asian issues, themes. Sort of my passion is to challenge stereotypes and get personal, and thinking that's how we get better dialogue. And I'm finishing a feature documentary called Out of the Stands. It looks at South Asian hockey dreams. Follow a couple young kids pursuing their hockey NHL dreams over a season, and it's called Out of the Stands for TELUS Originals and TVO.
Hi, I'm Priyanka Desai. I'm a broadcast journalist turned documentary filmmaker. That's where the loud voice comes from. I've been working in documentary films, mostly in India for a long time. I'm originally from Mumbai. Moved here a couple of years ago in Canada, and I'm so grateful to be living and working among some of the most talented documentary filmmakers here. Most of my work surrounds talking about social justice through food. So currently I'm in production with Joanna here. She's producing and I'm directing a 4-part docu-series with TELUS Originals. It's called Not Your Butter Chicken, which we will talk about later.
Thanks, everyone. So let's roll back to the past, and I invite each of the panelists to take us into a scene from your process and your work and your life where you found the subject really taking a toll on you. How did that affect you? And please share that moment with all of us.
So with my film, Inai, it's a self-reflective documentary. So I'm the director, but I'm also in the film, and it's about me and my husband and our relationship and how it's been affected by labor migration. So the whole film is taking a toll on me constantly. But in terms of like a specific moment, I would say it's the development process, trying to explain this project to other people and make it something that they can understand, but also aren't too afraid of and are willing to support. How it affected me was mainly I just kind of had to sit down and really figure out if I was brave enough to make the film and if I wanted to do that to myself and to my marriage, which is brand new, and my family, what are the emotional consequences or just the general consequences of doing this. I figured out that I was brave enough and me and my husband want to do it, so we went forth.
Wow. Have you found a way to kind of shelter part of your marriage for yourself apart from the story? Has that been an active process that you've gone through with your husband?
I mean, a lot of it is just really good pre-production and planning, like when are we shooting and when are we not shooting? I've had people say, why don't you just continue shooting? We still need this. We don't have a scene like this. And, maybe you should consider that. I'm like, no, I think we're done. We've filmed what we can and we're going to make something great out of what we've got.
And we're going to make dinner now.
Yes. Yeah. And we're going to go to bed. Yeah.
Kent, do you have something from your past work where your mental health was being very affected by the project, where you found the subject taking a toll on you?
Yes, definitely. But one of the things that I learned when it comes to documentary filmmaking is the duty of care. The duty of care for your subjects and for yourself, which became, which became a mandate pretty much on all of the productions I've been doing. It's just really making sure that our participants and myself are just as comfortable with each other, especially when we're talking about personal stuff. With my current project right now, my family is involved in it. My dad and my sister is in it, and we're talking about our feelings for the first time, which is not really a thing when it comes to Asian community. Parents really don't want to share the burden of the hardships that they've gone through to their kids because, they want to save their kids the trouble of feeling that way. And I guess for the second project that I have, I'd love to show and share a little bit of a clip from Treasure of the Rice Terraces. And for that film, it's a project that's been in development for 4 years. And I think coming into it, I thought it was just going to be an exploration of tattoo culture, especially our tattoo culture as Filipinos. But then I realized that it was more an exploration of my Filipino identity, especially living here in Canada. And I know sometimes it's so hard to kind of convince people that when somebody's experiencing a little bit of an identity crisis, that the stakes are not high enough. But for me, I really pushed for that. I think once, if somebody has a clear understanding of what their identity is, whether it's sexual or cultural, they have a better mindset and they feel more confident talking about their experiences and themselves in front of everybody.
I can't wait to watch the whole film. Baljit, do you have something you want to share from the past?
Yeah, it's sort of interesting. Even when I pick topics that I think are going to be light, they never turn out light. But that's the beauty about life, you just never know what's going to happen when you follow a journey. But when I was looking at the question, what came to mind was probably my first documentary, Warrior Boys. Because it was my first documentary, so I really, it was sort of, I learned making it, but the premise behind Warrior Boys is sort of like why so many young South Asians were vulnerable to gangs. So I focus on a Surrey high school, follow 2 kids at the crossroads, and then there was another character who left the gang, spent some time in jail, and became an activist and sort of shared his story, and a vice principal. And the school is predominantly South Asian. So in making that, I guess, what I've learned, lesson one, when you pick a subject, you're in it for the long haul. You can't just do a film like that and split. Like I had to get the trust of vulnerable teens, and be open to their schedule and kind of like following them and just taking my time and just developing like an authentic kind of relationship, because they're like, who are you? And suspicious and like, why am I in their school? And, and it was hard because, I'd be filming this kid. He was like 15, and then the next time I'd see him, he'd be like, all beaten in his head, and I'm like, what happened? And he's like, I got jumped. So I was like worried about his safety and what even being in this film, like how that impact him, because it was on television. It was for Global, and it played at other. It did well in terms of broadcasting. So that was always in my mind, like where we're meeting. Is he safe? Staying in touch with him, like, part of why he was drawn to gangs was because nobody was really looking out for him. So, yeah, that was, in fact, that was before Facebook, like MSN, Messenger, where are you? And then, he'd come for a shoot and a car would pull up with some, pretty serious young guys, like, and then he'd get out, and I'm like, oh my God, like, what am I doing? I'm so over my head. And then with another character, Jagdeep, he was in a gang, and I'm from East Van, I know that gang, and just sort of his journey and just like how am I gonna kind of connect with him? So we took a lot of time to get to know each other and coming to the office, just chatting, because he was really scared, weary of me, like, what's your angle, because that's sort of like been the trajectory of his life. But we did the film, and the heaviest scene was almost near the end of that journey, where he speaks so personally of where he was at a crossroads, and so that was heavy. But the thing that I learned too is like, you still have this connection, and then you finish the film, but it's now you're doing promotion, and then he would get really emotional because he was like, I don't want to keep being seen as an ex-gangster, and they, like, you have to take care of your characters, do no harm all the way through, and when you do media and radio, and they'd ask, it was emotionally really draining, like, and I'm kind of rambling a bit, but again, in that topic, I learned a lot, and another thing is, when I'm kind of going with the thing, but like, if you're going to do a challenging topic, just be really mindful of who you're working with, your crew, Sometimes I would feel like one of the DPs I was working with was very judgmental and very uncomfortable being in that vibe amongst all these youth. And, that's just, lesson learned. And then I had to change that, but I was kind of learning as I was going. And then, sadly, we won't get into too much, but sadly, like, I got connected to these kids, and, one of the main subjects died. The person who, was at a crossroads, Jagdeep, was in the gang, and then he came out, he died. And another kid that's in my film died. So it's it's heavy. Yeah. And just hearing about it and what can I do, and, showing the film to them and knowing that they're going to walk in school the next day and all the kids will have seen it. Like, are you okay with this? That was pretty heavy. And this really quiet kid said, yeah, sure. So that was heavy, yeah. And just seeing, like, and then I would see Jagdeep, and then I would film him, and then again, I'd see him, like, with a gash or something on his head. I'm like, what happened? He goes, oh, I got jumped. I'm like, oh my God. I feel so over my head. But, you got to stay true to why am I doing what the story, do no harm, you know what I mean? Like, nothing is worth the story, like, your safety, and and anyways, I don't know, I don't want to take up all the time, but another one I think where it really hit me the most, I'll try to be super brief, but I'm like, okay, I did this film on youth, and it was pretty tough, and it's like, especially trying to, film teenagers, with like, oh my God, it's hard. Because they don't come, they're not reliable, like whatever. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to go to seniors. I'm going to go to a senior home. They're going to want to see me every day. Like, I'm going to look at like assisted care that caters to South Asians. And it was a really good experience, and they were really happy to see me. But again, I heard about a lot of hardships, and in the making of that film, some of the residents died. But probably the most profound thing was in the making of the film, my own mother died. and she got hit by a car. Yeah, I won't get into too much because I'll start crying, but I couldn't finish the movie. Like, I was really, like, struggling. And somebody said to me, maybe you need to be in the film and share kind of what happened and why you, do you know what I mean? And all the residents knew what happened, and the whole process was very therapeutic, to be honest. I got a lot of love from these seniors, you know? Like, even on the day of the funeral, they were calling me, like, the residents. So sometimes, you know, but, you know, things happen in life, and that was really challenging. Like, you've been in a film, you put yourself in film, and I reluctantly had to put in my film, but that was the only way I could finish it. Yeah, that's it.
Wow, thank you, Baljeet.
Oh. I didn't even finish.
It's
You're too good, Joanna.
It's interesting how many filmmakers who put themselves in the film often share that this is actually a healing and cathartic process and can be a part of building mental health between yourself, between the subject, between the community. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Priyanka.
Thank you, Baljeet, for sharing that. And I've seen Baljeet work because we work on a project together, and I've seen how passionately she's concerned about every character. I think all filmmakers, we are not doing fiction here, you know, so we don't know how the characters are going to behave, how their life is going to turn. So these are real people and real stories that we are talking about at all times. So there is so much like we can imagine what the arc is going to be, the story arc is going to be, but there's only so much that you can plan for. There are so many moving parts at every given point that you got to be prepared for what's happening next. And I feel like as documentary filmmakers, you're putting yourself in situations where you are witnessing a lot of emotional situations or changes that are happening in your character. You start filming a character, and you film a character because you're in some kind of a love in that character, with that character, you know, and you start rooting for them. You know, you want them to have like a really good life, but you also want your story to come out really well. So there is this constant negotiation that you have to do every single day as to how emotional or personal I can get with this, and how can I be more objective or stay out of it and let the story unfold on its own. I personally think that, you know, no documentary filmmaking is objective filmmaking. You know how people talk about, I want to be a fly on the wall. No. I feel like the moment you decide, I want to place my camera here at this angle, at this height, you are narrating the story from your perspective. So it is subjective at every given point. This is the story as you see it. And I think most of the times you see it as per your lived experiences, your past experiences. I'm going to share something. Since I came from a broadcast journalism background, and I don't know if you guys know much about Indian broadcast journalism. It's very fast. Like, you have to be super fast. You don't have time for emotions. You don't have time for anything. But you're always told that extreme emotions make great television. You know, that's what is drilled into your system. So you're always looking for that extreme emotion, you know. You either make the person cry, or you may either make the person laugh, right? And then I had transitioned into documentary filmmaking, and I had started making documentaries for television. And there was this big terrorist attack that Mumbai had experienced, and we were doing an aftermath follow-up of the event that happened. And then in that, a lot of police officers lost their lives. I remember this one police officer who came from a really humble is probably not the best way to describe it, but extremely low socioeconomic background. And I was in there in his home, and he had died in that fighting that terrorist attack. And we were talking, I was talking to his wife, and she was sharing, she doesn't know what, most of the times she's in grief, right? This is months after. She's talking to me about how her situation is. The whole idea of the documentary was, how can we help the survivors of this big terrorist attack that the city faced? And we wanted to show how, in what conditions the family members are now living, and how the government needs to help them more, right? But in that whole moment, I was trying to show that, this is their condition, you got to help them. And I was on this crusade in my head, right, that I got to help them, And she started talking, and then his daughter, 11-year-old daughter, just comes out of the other room and starts talking about her father. And my camera person was like, oh, this is gold, right? Like, now we have a really young person. And I just pressed his shoulder there, and I was like, stop. Like, we don't know, we don't know if the mother consents to this, because right now she just trusts us enough. There's so much trust that you develop when you're filming something. And as filmmakers, as good professionals, we can build that trust really fast, because that's why we are good at our craft, right? But we need to know when to not take advantage of that trust. We need to know when to stop filming. We need to know when it's a good moment, that this is it. We don't need this. Is this going to help my story? Is this going to elevate my story? Maybe not. But it's to each it's our own, and we all kind of learn in our own small way. Yeah. Don't you agree? Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah.
Yes. Especially when you're, like in our case with the teaser, we were blocked by COVID so many times trying to get to the village. To those who don't know, Apawangod is 106 years old. So she was considered high risk when COVID was happening. And obviously the project requires travel, so we weren't able to travel. But when we got there, we weren't even allowed to film anything right away. We had to immerse ourselves, get to know the community. Like, we even helped, my producer and my DP helped the community build their basketball court, and like finish that first before we can even start filming. And I think that's what you were talking about, Pri, is that, it does take time to build that trust, but once you have that trust, like, you can't take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's like a glass, the trust is like a glass. Once it's broken, it's broken. You can't rebuild it. And one needs to be really, really mindful about that. Do we have time for another example, or you want to move on to the next question?
Well, Thea is being a little quiet over here. Do you have anything you'd like to share on this topic? I can bring us into the present, maybe, and we can riff on the present. So we had talked as a panel about this idea of the symbiotic relationship between the storyteller and the subject, and that we are often an active mirror, in a sense, because we are drawn to subjects that speak to our own stories, our own past pain, trauma, difficulties, challenges. And to what degree do you as creators allow that to come forward in your interactions with the subject? Do you show your own vulnerability to see their vulnerability that they're sharing with you? How do those things intersect for you in the present?
Well, in my film, I've got my partner and I've got my close friends in it. So the subject are my friends and myself. So it is really hard to just pretend like we don't have a million other things that we also are thinking about as we're documenting, and that we don't have this relationship, I think it's cool because they give me the access, and they understand, and they want me to make my film because they support me. But at the same time, like, we've had those conversations of, okay, thank you for wanting to support me, but where is the line where you're just supporting me versus where do you want to even be in this movie? I think it's really, really difficult. Well, maybe with my film specific, because they're my friends, to kind of see that line. But I think, as Kent was saying, like this need to care, to do no harm and to continue doing that after. My film is still my film is alive. Like, it's not only just in post-production, but like the real life of my characters is still going on, and the film is still carrying on in my head, where I've got, like, okay, I've got a sequel coming up, as you were saying with your project, you know? So I think with the, and sorry, back to your question, with the, how they interweave, I find it very difficult to sort of know when this is just our friendship versus this is part of the film and this is the documentary. And it's constantly a gray line for me.
How do you protect each other's mental health in that process?
Well, actually, my film kind of reflects that. So when you see it, you'll see us talking about, like, okay, our mental health here. But I think a lot of it is just continuing to have ongoing check-ins of, like, okay, this is the next thing we're doing. Are you comfortable with this? Constantly, which, you know, is difficult because as a filmmaker, I kind of can see really cool plot lines happening. And I'm like, this, I want to film that. I'm like, oh no, that would ruin their whole family if we blew that up. You know what I mean? Like, oh, this would just create. And so in my film, I can, you know, we ignore these things, but there was an argument that happened here and another argument that happened there, and we just sort of like have to let go of that. And as Priyanka was saying, like, this isn't trauma that I'm trying to, like, I want to create trauma with my movie. No, like, it's a healing process. At least for me it is. So how can we make sure that even though there's these amazing storylines happening, we stick to the vision of care and hopefully a better future and hopefully something more holistic at the end, rather than we've just created fires everywhere because it was cool to film, you know?
Kent, is there something you want to share about your own relationship with your subjects and how these stories intertwine?
For me, it's always about communicating why I want to make the film first. I think, you know, like, we can always dive into our personal stories later, but it's always letting the participants understand where it's coming from. I think that's the most important thing for me. When I did my first documentary with Story Hive's help, Kalinga, which is a film about Filipino caregivers and nannies and how their stories kind of helped me understand what my mom had to go through when she left me at the age of 6. And during that time when I was just looking for people to talk to, the very first thing that was asked to me is like, why do you wanna make this movie? And the moment I explained it to the titas who were featured in the film, they were like, okay, now we can talk about the personal stuff because we know that the intention behind it is good. So just making sure that, you know, that you're communicating that ahead of time before you even dive into personal conversations. Because the personal conversations, you will have time for it once you've started. And for me, it's like the more I shared my personal experience, the more I actually got things out of my participants.
Say something like that. Kent and I are making films with subject matter that is really similar, which is super awesome. But what you're saying just reminds me of, like, when I was trying to get permission to interview one of my subjects. I was telling them earlier, you were asking me if it was hard to get people to agree. And for one of my subjects, she was like, oh my God, thank you so much. I can't wait for my interview. This is such a big moment for me. I've never had the opportunity to even figure out and understand how to have this conversation that I've been meaning to have, or I just never dreamed of being able to do it. I'm going to cry so much. Oh my goodness, can't wait. You know, that was like a massive text to me. And I'm like, okay, like, this is awesome. But also, like, how do I make sure that the care is ongoing and that this isn't like, that we're not going to take advantage of this amazing interview that we're going to get? And how do we, like, you know, show it in the film in a way that still does justice to what happened? Yeah.
Baljit, how much of yourself have you found yourself sharing in the process of building these relationships with your subjects?
Should I roll the clip and talk after, or do you have context? Yeah, if we could just roll the clip. It's a trailer for a film I did in 2019 called Because We're Girls. So what was the question?
Well, this is obviously a very emotional example of Because We Are Girls. I love the film, and the final scene I think I will never forget. I felt like it had me by the throat. How involved did you find yourself with this incredibly emotional process? And again, how did you protect each other in the process?
it was a deep, like, relationship. Just to give some context, one of the sisters is, well, I know they're all friends of mine now, but one of them, we've been friends for a long time. And she came to me one time, and we're just having a coffee, and she's like, have you ever thought of doing a film on, sexual violence in the South Asian community? I'm like, how would I tell that story? And then she shared with me what she had gone through, and that her and her sisters were going to go to the police. And anyways, we stayed in touch, and she'd always give me updates. And then when things started to move, I went to a pre-trial, and then it got selected to go to Supreme Court. I'm like, this is a story that has to be told. And anyways, so I was lucky, blessed to be part of the early, just getting to know her sharing. And then, the National Film Board came on board, and they thought I was a good person to tell the story too because of my connection to her. But telling a story like this, that's really reflective of your own community, like there's so many parallels in, I'll say, that I could relate to, immigrant experience, pressures on your parents, sponsoring people, 1 million people living at your house, off and on. Just growing up as a brown female, just sort of, you almost feel like there's a handbook given to you, you know what I mean? What to do. And we just kind of go with take all these sort of things on without really kind of dismantle it, the patriarchy, just dismantle. So for me, getting closer to the story, I had to do a lot of that work myself, and also you become so close to everybody. They were calling me all the time, and you're like a filmmaker friend, almost therapist. I'm like, oh my God, I can't handle this. It's a lot. And they're literally giving you a gift. This is our truth. This is our story. Balji, don't mess it up. And you want to put something out there that does no harm, that's empowering. And it's like you would do for your own family. So it's a lot. I knew the whole community is going to be watching this one and could be very judgmental or it could go totally sideways. So I felt a lot of pressure. And sometimes, in the making of, Jeeti, who you just saw, she would get really upset with the legal system. It's taking so long. And she's like, that's, I know there's a publication ban, but I want to go talk to the media. I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not a lawyer, but I'm so over my head here. You know what I mean? And then I reached out to a women's organization, Vancouver Rape Relief. And I knew the executive director. She's a South Asian woman. I'm like, you got to help me. I'm so over my head. Kind of answering to everything, and I need support, and they need support, and they need that kind of support in this journey. So that was important. But what else can I say? Just, it took, I was committed to see what happened because they went to court, but the trial took forever because obviously the perpetrator did not want their testimony. So he would make all these excuses. I've got a new lawyer, I'm not well, a year would go by, and during that time, it was just we were kind of we were working with the NFB, but they're like, okay, we have to take a pause, we don't have the budget to keep going, we'll come back to it. How can I just stop? I'm like, tell me your story, I'm here for you, and then it'd be like, oh, I'll come back when the money's here. You can't do that. So when they were going up to Williams Lake to get ready to tell their test, I went. I just took a little camera and I went. We would be sharing hotel rooms, and I would, some of the footage that looks terrible, I shot, where it's emotional, because it's should I shoot this, really intense crying scene, or just it's really hard to tell your story, about historical sexual abuse. The lawyers just break you down. But anyways, if you're in, you're in, and so the process took a long time. And my producer was lovely, and we had to wait, and he's like, maybe you can't have that in your film. It's just gonna have to focus the trial thread. I'm like, no, but everybody's gonna want to know, and that's not the main focus of the film, but I was committed, and that's the thing. I mentioned earlier, you have to be down and be really real, and whenever you get really overwhelmed, I always ask myself, what's my intention of being a filmmaker? What is this about, And I had to do a lot of work a lot of things came up in the film that impacted me, like that maybe things that I needed to kind of look at more closer.
That's actually that's the perfect lead-in to the future. In fact, because what I hear there is, in some of your stories, often saying, "Oh my gosh, I'm in over my head. I need help." Especially as I'm sure a younger filmmaker too, that was just so much to take on. And I hear in your stories as well that often we're alone in dealing with the mental health aspect for ourselves, for our participants, for our friends who may be supporting our work. So something that East by Northwest has put forward is, how can we make mental health a budget line, a process, an integral part of documentary filmmaking? How can we advocate for that? How can it be an action point? So Priyanka, I'm sorry I pulled you from the present into the future, but perhaps you could take us through that.
Yeah, I agree. And you know how I like talking about budget lines, because I feel like at the end of the day, you know, if it's not in your cost report, if it's not in your budget line, it doesn't exist, you know. You need to have some money on allocation to whatever you want to do. People talk about having diversity, inclusivity in every project. I'm like, show me the line item that has budget allotted to that, you know, because it just cannot happen because someone wants it to happen, right? We got to make it happen. We got to build system around it. And it applies to the mental health situation here as well. Currently, we are working on a project which is called Not Your Butter Chicken, as I mentioned earlier. It is when people ask me about what's your project about, and I say, oh, it's a food and travel show, you know, about South Asian culture, but it's so much more than that. And in 2018, I lost my father to mental health. He had a severe loss of memory due to Alzheimer, and we went through the whole caregiving process. We went through all of that, and then, you know, you kind of think that you have dealt with it. You've went to therapy, you've dealt with it, and then comes up a project like Not Your Butter Chicken, where the lead, my host, is a primary caregiver to her mother, who is struggling with dementia. And then every time you are on set, or even when you're following Instagram, you know, of your host, you know, you get flashes of your own life, you know, relived in one way or the other. And it's hard because you're watching it and you have so much reference to your past experience that you sometimes cannot, you know, separate yourself from it. And we've filmed in the hospital. A couple times I've been, you know, and visited her mom. And every time I see her, I'm like, Priyanka, stop. You know, this is not your dad. This is not your grandmother, you know, who faced through similar situation. You're a filmmaker. You got to look at them. You got to listen to them. And you got to see, you know, have the big picture. You know how we constantly remind ourselves of the big picture? You know, what's the big picture? I would like to share a little clip from our project. These are like really like new rushes that we just formed because we are still in production for this show. I would love to request that and share that, please. Thank you. So yeah, we are working. Thank you. Yeah, so we're working on this docu-series right now, and we are just so grateful that, you know, how much ever trust building that we do, I feel like at the end of the day, you have to be grateful for your characters, your subjects, to be sharing their stories, sharing their personal moments, really intimate moments. She didn't have to do that. You know, she didn't have to share the moment that she had with her mother about, you know, her mother literally forgetting her name, you know, and she didn't have to share that with us, right? How much ever insurance, agreements, you know, legal papers you'll get people to sign, the most important thing is the code of trust. And, you know, you got to build that, and you need to keep that, not just, as you said, not just to the duration of the project, but beyond. Because think about when you're 70, 80 years old, how are you going to think about this decision that you made today? And that could be a good way to think, whether you're doing the right thing at that moment or not.
Thank you, Priyanka. Well, that is our time for today. But coming back to that action item and how we can take the learnings of this panel forward, and how can we make mental health a budget line? How can we make emotional health a process? I would put that out to the amazing community here and over coffee and over the gala this evening. Just let it be a topic we can ruminate on together, and how that trust we share with ourselves and our subjects can be something that we don't break, that we have so much gratitude for, and that we can find ways, actionable ways to protect each other. Thank you to our panelists.
Thank you.